The AI Revolution in Medicine, GPT-4 and Beyond, was published in April 2023 with authors Peter Lee, PhD, Corporate VP at Microsoft, Carrie Goldberg, a medical and science journalist, and Isaac Zach Kohana, MD, PhD, a pediatric endocrinologist and the editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine AI Journal. In the foreword, Sam Altman explains that early in the development of GPT-4, he collaborated with Microsoft to grant experimental access to a small number of people, hoping to gain some understanding of its implications in a few key areas. He notes the enormous challenges facing medicine and healthcare, those being rising costs, lack of equitable access, aging populations, doctor and nurse burnout, and global pandemics. Chapter 1, entitled First Contact, written by Peter Lee, where he describes in the fall of 2022, he was given a new system to evaluate, codenamed DaVinci 3, which later evolved into GPT-4. He describes using this system as nurturing a relationship. He started by asking a medical question about metformin, a type 2 diabetes drug, and it gave a very reasonable and thorough response. So he asked the GPT-4, how did you learn so much about this? And it replied very confidently, I received a master's in public health. To which Lee said, well, that's impossible. And the GPT responded, well, I was simply trying to impress with a very detailed answer. Lee mentions that later version of GPT corrected this problem, so such a hallucination he's not encountered since. He then talked about how GPT-4 was used to take the USMLE medical board test, and it scored greater than 90%. He also did another test asking ChatGPT to imitate Dr. Zach Kohana to converse with Zach's elderly mother, and the AI responded that it really couldn't do this for ethical reasons. This impressed Lee tremendously and made him think even deeper about the reasoning power of GPT-4. Chapter 2, Medicina Ex Machina by Peter Lee. He begins to talk about GPT as a medical assistant. He's told about a term, pajama time, from a radiologist friend of his. This is where a physician has to spend his after hours at home completing all the paperwork he needs to do to keep up. Recently, Microsoft purchased the company Nuance, and Nuance has developed a system, Dragon Ambient Experience, DAX, which can listen to and transcribe a patient encounter. AI can also write a script to help a doctor talk to a patient about compliance. Lee also mentions another hallucination where GPT had guessed at a patient's BMI, even though it wasn't explicitly stated in the patient encounter. Chapter 3, The Big Question. Does it understand? Peter Lee starts off by asking GPT to translate a French expression. It did a great job and even put the translation in context, which the other translation services cannot do. He says that to really understand GPT-4, you have to use it. You can't depend upon what others are telling you about how it performs. He had it analyze and modify a poem, thereby testing its ability to understand different metaphors. He mentions that AI is not embodied, therefore cannot relate to the wider world. But Lee is still impressed that GPT is more than just a stochastic parrot. Chapter 4, Trust But Verify, by Dr. Isaac Kahana. As a pediatric endocrinologist, Kahana consulted GPT with a problem with a particular neonate. It correctly diagnosed the neonate's genetic defect, which is as rare as 1 in 100,000, he estimates, and it convinced him of its ability. Regarding hallucinations, he says, I've known all too many doctors with a superb bedside manner who were beloved by their patients and who dispensed incorrect advice and therapeutic plans with confidence. He's strongly human-in-the-loop proponent in this regard. Chapter 5, The AI Augmented Patient, by Carrie Goldberg. She asked GPT if a patient would be better off not using a large language model, but rather just conversing with their own doctor. It replied that with a doctor, the patient could ask detailed questions and receive personalized feedback. Goldberg remarks, let's pause for a sad laugh at this optimistic prediction. She also mentioned that it might be useful in solving the problem of equitable access to health care. Chapter 6, So Much More, Math, Coding, and Logic, by Peter Lee. He says it can help make medical calculations like drip rate for an IV, which is typically a nursing duty. He asks if GPT-4 is simply a glorified auto-completion engine doing next word prediction. He ends with a demonstration of when it made a math error for a statistical calculation. Chapter 7, The Ultimate Paperwork Shredder, by Peter Lee. It's been acknowledged that the daunting task of paperwork consumes up to half of the healthcare professional's time, contributing to the phenomenon of burnout. During the clinical encounter, the patient must compete with a computer monitor for the physician's attention. Structuring data from the clinical encounter via natural language processing makes GPT an ideal tool. In Chapter 8, Smarter Science, Isaac Kahana remarks, writing and running a large clinical evaluation of a new treatment takes huge effort and expense. The details of this multi-year process are myriad. He gives an example of AI helping the clinical testing of a new weight loss drug. It can also contribute to basic research. Chapter 9, Safety First, features all three authors. They note regulation tends to lag behind new technology, saying that U.S. federal law requiring seatbelts didn't occur until 1968. But the FDA has approved hundreds of AI-augmented tools and developed a framework for software as a medical device. They say a new cross-sector group called the Coalition for a Health AI has proposed a blueprint for making sure medical AI is trustworthy, from fairness to transparency to reliability. Chapter 10, The Big Black Bag, by Goldberg and Kahana. They provide a scenario where a future iteration of GPT could serve as a personal medical agent for an older person who is homebound. This agent could provide personal care through observation and conversation, addressing the problem of pervasive access to up-to-date health care. I tried GPT-4o to summarize each chapter in this book, but its output was too general. Instead, I tried to pick interesting items that were worth discussion. I strongly suggest giving this book a full read. The main takeaway is this, that LLMs perform too convincingly well to be ignored in the practice of medicine, with the caveat that the human in the loop concept be exercised. I hope that you can bear with me, as this is my first serious attempt at producing a YouTube video. Anyway, I have a Substack online newsletter, also called CogSci AI, which covers news and trends of all things AI with a concentration in medical/healthcare AI. I'm also writing fiction in the form of a series of stories I called Tigers of Wrath, which is a view of mankind's reaction to AGI and beyond. And this is only for premium subscribers. I hope you could check it out.